It's 2 in the morning. The page of the book is a blur of meaningless symbols, the ink seeming to swim before your exhausted eyes. You've read the same paragraph 10 times, maybe more, and yet the information refuses to stick, sliding away like water through your fingers. A familiar sense of quiet panic begins to creep in, a cold dread that whispers a devastating question in the silence of the room. What if I'm just not smart enough for this? This moment, shared by countless students across generations, feels like a personal failure, a testament to some inherent intellectual limit. The weight of expectation, both internal and external, presses down, and the looming exam feels less like a test of knowledge and more like a final judgment on your capability. The highlighter in your hand feels useless, a yellow streak across a page you can't comprehend. But what if that entire narrative, that deeply ingrained story of struggle and intellectual inadequacy, is built on a fundamental lie? What if the problem isn't your brain, your work ethic, or your potential? Consider for a moment that the very tools you were given, the methods championed by schools and ingrained through years of practice, the highlighting, the endless rereading, the marathon study sessions, are not just inefficient, but are actively sabotaging your ability to learn. Imagine that the frustration you feel isn't a sign of your limits, but the symptom of a broken process. The real tragedy isn't that you can't learn, it's that you were never taught how to learn correctly. This isn't about a lack of effort, but a misapplication of energy on a grand, systemic scale. This journey is not about offering simple study hacks or promising effortless success. It's about a complete paradigm shift, a dismantling of the myths that have turned learning into a chore and a source of anxiety. We will explore the counterintuitive, scientifically proven truth that genuine learning is often uncomfortable and feels difficult, not because you are failing, but because your brain is actively forging strong, lasting neural connections. We are here to hand you the correct user manual for your mind, one that replaces passive frustration with active, strategic engagement. The promise is clear. It's not about possessing a privileged brain, but about finally understanding the powerful mechanics of how it was designed to work all along. Prepare to unlearn everything you thought you knew about studying. At the heart of this widespread failure lies a seductive and deeply ingrained villain: passive learning. It's the method we all know, the one that feels intuitive and safe. This is the quiet library student, diligently rereading chapters, their textbook a canvas of fluorescent yellow, orange and pink. It's the act of listening to a lecture and nodding along, feeling the reassuring wave of comprehension wash over you. Society has sanctified this image as the epitome of a good student. The problem is that this entire approach is built on a cognitive trap. We have been taught to be passive receptacles of information, patiently waiting for knowledge to seep into our minds. We treat our brains like sponges, assuming that simple exposure is enough for absorption, when in reality, the brain is not a sponge, but a dynamic connection-building machine that demands active engagement. This cognitive trap has a name, a term that should be at the forefront of every learner's mind: the illusion of fluency. It's the deceptive feeling of mastery that arises from familiarity. When you reread a chapter, your brain recognizes the words, the sentences, the concepts. This recognition is easy and fluid, and we tragically misinterpret this ease as evidence of learning. It's like listening to your favorite song 100 times. You recognize the melody and the lyrics instantly, creating a feeling that you know it by heart. But try to write down the lyrics from memory, and you'll likely find gaping holes. The fluency was an illusion of competence, not true mastery. This is precisely what happens when you sit down for an exam. You realize you recognize everything, but you can't recall anything from a blank page. Highlighting and rereading are the primary architects of this grand illusion. They are fundamentally low-effort activities that provide the maximum feeling of productivity with minimal cognitive work. When you drag a highlighter across a sentence, you are not engaging with the idea. You are merely performing a physical action of marking. Your brain gets a small, satisfying hit of progress without having to do the hard work of building a memory. It's the mental equivalent of junk food. It feels good in the moment but provides no long-term nourishment. True learning, the kind that lasts, requires what cognitive scientists call desirable difficulties. It needs effortful engagement, a struggle that signals to your brain that this information is important and must be encoded for future use, stored permanently. The science behind this is unequivocal. Our memory operates on 2 distinct levels: recognition and recall. Recognition is a shallow form of memory, essentially a matching process. Have I seen this before? It's a low-energy task for the brain. Recall, on the other hand, is a much deeper and more demanding process. It requires the brain to actively retrieve information from its vast network of neurons to rebuild a memory from scratch. What do I know about this topic? Passive study techniques, like rereading, only ever exercise the muscle of recognition. An exam or a real-world problem, however, is almost always a test of recall. We spend all our time practicing for a simple matching game, only to be confronted with a demanding test of deep retrieval. This brings us to the most critical turning point in our journey, a revelation that redefines the very nature of learning. The discomfort you feel when you try to remember a formula, the strain of trying to explain a concept in your own words, the frustration of staring at a blank flashcard. These are not signals of failure. They are the sound of learning happening in real time. This struggle is the workout for your brain. Each time you force your mind to retrieve a piece of information, you are strengthening the neural pathway to it, making it easier to access in the future. We have been conditioned to avoid this mental friction, to seek the path of least resistance. The truth is that this friction, this desirable difficulty, is the only path to true lasting knowledge. If passive learning is the poison, then its antidote is a powerful strategy known as active recall. This is the first master key. Put simply, active recall or active retrieval is the act of deliberately retrieving information from your brain rather than passively absorbing it. It's the opposite of rereading. Instead of looking at the map, you put the map away and try to draw it from memory. Instead of rewatching a lecture, you pause and attempt to summarize its key points aloud, without looking at your notes. It is the conscious and effortful process of pulling knowledge out, not simply letting it flow in. This single shift in approach transforms studying from a passive act of reception into an active process of creation and reinforcement, fundamentally altering the way your brain handles information. Think of a memory as a faint path in a dense forest. The first time you learn something, you create a barely visible trail. If you simply look at a photograph of the trail, passive review, the path itself remains overgrown and faint. But every time you force yourself to walk that path without the photograph, active recall, you clear away the undergrowth, stomp down the earth, and make the trail more defined and easier to navigate next time. Neuroscientifically, this is what's happening. The struggle to retrieve a memory strengthens the synaptic connections associated with it. The harder it is to recall, within limits, the more potent the strengthening effect. You are literally building and paving the neural highways that lead directly to that piece of knowledge. So how do you practice this? The tools are surprisingly simple, yet profoundly effective. The most famous is the humble flashcard, but used correctly. You must attempt to answer the question on the front before you dare to flip it over. Another powerful method is self-quizzing. After reading a chapter, close the book and write down everything you can remember on a blank sheet of paper, a technique often called blurting, or even more simply, transform every subheading in your textbook into a question and try to answer it. Imagine a medical student who, instead of just rereading about the Krebs cycle, closes their notes and tries to draw the entire diagram from scratch, no matter how messy or incomplete the first attempt is. This is active recall in its purest form. Let's contrast two students preparing for the same history exam. The first spends 3 hours rereading the chapters on the French Revolution, highlighting key names and dates. They finish feeling confident, lulled by the illusion of fluency. The second student spends only an hour and a half. They spend 30 minutes on a quick read-through, then an hour creating and answering questions for themselves. What were the 3 main socio-economic causes of the revolution? Explain the reign of terror in your own words. The second student will feel less confident initially. Their session was harder, filled with moments of hesitation and mental blanks. Yet come exam day, the first student will struggle to retrieve specifics, while the second student has already practiced the exact skill the exam demands: retrieval. The initial experience with active recall can be discouraging. It feels slower, more difficult and less productive than passively gliding through your notes. You will be confronted with what you don't know, which can be a brutal shock to the ego. But this confrontation is the entire point. It is the diagnostic tool that reveals your knowledge gaps with perfect clarity. The difficulty is not a sign that the method is failing, it is the sign that it is working. You are substituting the false comfort of familiarity for the genuine long-term competence that comes from struggle. You must learn to embrace this desirable difficulty, to see the mental strain not as a barrier, but as the very engine of learning, the process of carving knowledge into your mind. Now, active recall is the engine, but it needs a sophisticated fuel delivery system to be truly effective. This is where the second master key comes in: spaced repetition. To understand its power, we must travel back to the 19th century and meet a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus. He was obsessed with memory and forgetting, and through meticulous self-experimentation, he plotted what is now famously known as the forgetting curve. This curve demonstrates a shocking truth. Without any reinforcement, we forget an enormous portion of what we learn, often within hours or days. That marathon study session you pulled before a final, Ebbinghouse's work, proves that most of that information likely vanished from your brain shortly after the test was over. The forgetting curve is a steep downward slope. Imagine learning a new set of vocabulary words. On day 1, your retention is at 100%. But by day 2, without review, you might only remember 50, 60%. By the end of the week, you might be lucky to recall 20%. The curve illustrates that our brain is naturally wired to discard information it deems non-essential. It's a biological efficiency mechanism to prevent being overwhelmed. For the brain to mark information as important and worth keeping, it needs to receive a clear signal. This is where most students fail. They cram information in one massive session, which provides only a single weak signal. Then, as the curve predicts, the knowledge rapidly fades into oblivion, a wasted effort. Spaced repetition is the scientifically validated hack that flattens the forgetting curve, turning that steep drop into a gentle, manageable slope. The principle is elegantly simple. Instead of cramming reviews into one session, you space them out over increasing intervals of time. You might review a concept one day after first learning it, then 3 days later, then a week later, then a month later. Each time you review the information just as you are about to forget it, you send a powerful signal to the brain. This matters. Keep it. The review resets the forgetting curve, but each subsequent curve is shallower than the last. You are essentially telling your brain to move the information from short-term, volatile storage to long-term, stable storage. The neurochemical reason this works is fascinating. Reviewing information when it's still fresh and easy to recall has a minimal impact. It's too easy. The brain doesn't need to work hard. However, when you force your brain to retrieve a memory that is on the verge of being forgotten, the mental effort required is significantly greater. This effortful retrieval triggers stronger memory consolidation. It tells the memory encoding systems that because this specific piece of information was difficult and necessary to recall, it must be important for survival or future success. Therefore, the neural connections are reinforced much more robustly. It is the act of almost forgetting that makes the memory permanent, a beautiful paradox of learning. This leads to a profound shift in how we structure our time. The all-night cramming session, that rite of passage for students everywhere, is revealed to be one of the most ineffective strategies conceivable for long-term retention. The science is clear. 10 hours of study crammed into one day is vastly inferior to 10 hours of study spread out as 1-hour sessions over 10 days. This is the ultimate less is more scenario. By distributing your practice, you not only learn the material more deeply, but you also do it with less stress and panic. You are working with your brain's natural memory systems, not fighting a losing battle against them. The goal is no longer to stuff your head with information, but to intelligently schedule its reinforcement. With the master keys of active recall and spaced repetition in hand, we can now build an arsenal of practical, everyday tools. The first and perhaps most powerful of these is the Feynman technique, named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman. He was known not just for his genius in quantum physics, but for his uncanny ability to explain incredibly complex ideas in simple, intuitive terms. He believed that if you couldn't explain something simply, you didn't truly understand it. This technique is his method for achieving that deep, genuine understanding, and it is a merciless destroyer of the illusion of fluency. It's a tool for transforming shallow knowledge into profound comprehension. The technique consists of 4 simple steps. First, you choose a concept you want to understand. Take a blank sheet of paper and write the name of the concept at the top. Second, you pretend you are teaching this concept to a child. Write out an explanation of the idea using only simple language, basic words, and clean analogies. This step is crucial. The constraint of simplicity forces you to break down complex ideas into their core components and to connect them logically. You cannot hide behind jargon or convoluted phrasing. You are forced to confront the material head-on, translating it into a language of pure understanding. The third step is where the magic truly happens. As you write out your simple explanation, you will inevitably hit a wall. You will find gaps in your knowledge, areas where your explanation becomes fuzzy, or where you have to resort to the jargon you were trying to avoid. These are the borders of your understanding. This is the moment of diagnosis. Once you identify these weak points, you must go back to the source material, your textbook, lecture notes, or research papers, and study that specific part again until you can explain it in the simple terms required. This isn't about rereading the whole chapter. It's a targeted surgical strike on your own ignorance. Finally, after you have filled your knowledge gaps, you review your explanation and simplify it even further. Read it aloud. Does it sound convoluted? Are there any complex terms that could be replaced with simpler ones? Refine your analogies. The goal is to create a seamless, simple, and elegant narrative of the concept. The Feynman technique is so brilliant because it is a perfect self-contained system for active recall. It forces you to retrieve information. Step 2, identify the limits of your retrieval, Step 3, and then refine and consolidate that information until it is permanently and flexibly stored in your mind, Step 4. It is the ultimate test of true comprehension. While the Feynman technique hones your understanding, another tool is required to manage the very environment in which you study, your focus. In an age of constant digital distraction, the ability to concentrate deeply is a superpower. This is the problem that the Pomodoro technique is designed to solve. Developed by Francesco Cirillo in the 1980s, it's not a learning method itself, but a meta-strategy for managing time and mental energy, creating the perfect container for deep work. Its beauty lies in its radical simplicity, using nothing more than a timer to battle procrastination and train your focus muscle. It acknowledges that the human brain is not designed for endless hours of monotonous work. The mechanics are almost laughably easy, which is precisely why it works so well. You choose a single task to work on, set a timer for 25 minutes, and work on that task with absolute, single-minded focus. No email, no social media, no interruptions. When the timer rings, you have completed one Pomodoro. You then take a short, mandatory break of about 5 minutes. During this break, you must step away from your work, stretch, get a glass of water, look out the window. After 4 Pomodoros, you take a longer break of 15 to 30 minutes. This rhythmic cycle of focused sprint and restorative rest is perfectly attuned to our natural cognitive rhythms. The psychological genius of the Pomodoro technique is twofold. First, it demolishes procrastination by lowering the barrier to entry. The thought of studying for 3 hours can be daunting and paralyzing, but convincing yourself to work with intense focus for just 25 minutes, that feels achievable. It's a small concrete starting point that helps you overcome the initial friction of getting down to work. Second, the frequent scheduled breaks are not a sign of weakness. They are a strategic tool for preventing mental fatigue. They allow your brain's diffuse mode to work in the background, consolidating information and making creative connections, ensuring that the quality of your focus remains high throughout your study session. Crucially, the Pomodoro technique is the operating system on which other, more specific learning strategies can run effectively. It creates a sanctuary of focus. Within each 25-minute block, you can deploy your other weapons. You can spend 1 Pomodoro creating flashcards for active recall. You can dedicate the next to practicing the Feynman technique on a difficult concept. You can use another for solving practice problems. It provides the structure and discipline necessary to implement these effortful techniques consistently. Without a system to manage focus, our best intentions to use active recall are often derailed by the siren song of distraction. Pomodoro is the shield that protects your deep work. Now we add a third weapon to our practical arsenal, one that directly challenges the intuitive urge to master one thing before moving on to the next. This is the principle of interleaving, or interleaved practice. Traditional study involves blocked practice. You study one topic or type of problem in a single long block. For example, in math, you might do 30 problems on topic A, then 30 on topic B. This feels productive because you quickly get into a rhythm and your performance improves rapidly within that block. However, this is another illusion. Blocked practice trains your brain to perform on autopilot, without forcing it to think critically about which strategy to use. Interleaving flips this on its head. Instead of studying in blocks, you mix or interleave different topics or problem types within a single study session. Using the math example, you wouldn't do 30 problems of type A and then 30 of type B. Instead, you would do a mixed set of problems, A, B, B, A, C, A, B, C. This feels significantly harder and more chaotic. Your performance will be worse during the study session itself, as your brain is forced to constantly switch gears, unable to settle into a comfortable rhythm. It has to analyze each problem from scratch and decide which method or formula is appropriate, a far more cognitively demanding task. This initial difficulty is precisely why interleaving is so effective for building long-term, flexible knowledge. It forces your brain to practice not just how to solve a particular type of problem, but how to distinguish between different types of problems. This skill, discriminating between contexts is far more valuable than simply executing a solution on autopilot. Real-world situations and, more importantly, exams are almost always interleaved. The questions don't come in neat, predictable blocks. They are mixed up. Interleaving trains you for the chaos of reality, building a more agile and adaptable mind that can select the right tool for the job, rather than just knowing how to use one tool over and over again. Imagine two batters in baseball practice. One takes 50 swings at fastballs, then 50 at curveballs. The other takes 100 swings where the pitch type is completely random. Fastball, curveball, slider, changeup. The first batter will look much better in practice, quickly getting into the groove for each pitch type. The second batter will struggle more, constantly having to adjust. But in a real game, where the batter never knows what pitch is coming next, who do you think will be more successful? The one who practiced in a way that mirrors the demands of the game. Studying is no different. Interleaving is difficult, but it prepares you for the test, not just for the practice session. With this powerful arsenal of techniques, active recall, spaced repetition, the Feynman method, Pomodoro, and interleaving, we arrive at the final and most profound stage of this transformation. It involves moving beyond mere tools and strategies to address the underlying engine that drives them, your mindset. These techniques require effort, a willingness to embrace difficulty, and a resilience in the face of struggle. Without the correct core beliefs about learning and intelligence, even the best tools will eventually be abandoned for the comfortable path of passive learning. This is where we must evolve from a student into an autonomous learner. The foundation of this metamorphosis is a concept developed by Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck, the distinction between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. This is more than just positive thinking. It's a fundamental belief system about the nature of your own intelligence and abilities. It is the internal narrative that dictates how you interpret challenges, effort, and failure. Understanding your own position on this spectrum is the first step toward unlocking your true learning potential. It's the software that determines how effectively the hardware of your brain and the applications of your study techniques will run. A person with a fixed mindset believes that intelligence, talent, and ability are innate static traits. You are either smart or not smart. You have a math brain or you don't. From this perspective, effort is a bad thing. If you have to try hard, it must mean you aren't naturally gifted. Challenges are threatening because they risk revealing your inherent limitations. Failure is catastrophic because it becomes a permanent label on your identity. This mindset creates a desperate need to appear smart at all times, leading to a profound avoidance of the very struggles and difficulties that we now know are essential for deep learning. It's a self-sabotaging loop. In stark contrast, a person with a growth mindset believes that intelligence and abilities can be developed through dedication, strategic effort, and learning from failure. From this perspective, your base intelligence is just a starting point. Effort is not a sign of weakness. It is the very mechanism that activates and builds intelligence. Challenges are not threats, but opportunities for growth. Failure is not a devastating verdict, but a valuable source of information, a diagnostic tool that shows you where to improve. This mindset fosters a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for navigating difficult tasks. It is the fertile ground in which effortful strategies like active recall can truly take root. This is the ultimate connection. A growth mindset is the psychological fuel for every effective learning strategy we have discussed. It reframes the entire experience. The discomfort of active recall is no longer a sign of your inadequacy. It is the feeling of your brain growing stronger. The frustration of identifying a knowledge gap with the Feynman technique is no longer a moment of shame. It is an exciting opportunity for targeted improvement. The initial slowness of interleaving is not a failure. It's a sign that you are building flexible, adaptable knowledge. The growth mindset allows you to embrace these desirable difficulties as the path to mastery, not as evidence of your limits. This shift in mindset elevates the entire purpose of studying. The goal is no longer to simply survive an exam or get a good grade. The goal becomes something much larger and more empowering: to become an autonomous, self-directed learner. It is about cultivating the skill of learning itself, the meta skill that allows you to approach any complex subject, whether it's learning a new language, mastering a musical instrument, coding an application, or understanding quantum physics, with confidence and a strategic plan. It's the realization that the ability to learn is not a gift bestowed upon a lucky few, but a skill that can be systematically developed by anyone. The final metamorphosis is this: you stop seeing yourself as a temporary student cramming for a test and start seeing yourself as a lifelong learner, building a mind. The techniques we've explored are not just about improving academic performance. They are about removing the fear of the unknown and the complex. They give you a process for deconstructing and mastering any field of knowledge you choose. This unleashes a sense of freedom and potential that transcends the classroom. Now, the world is full of fascinating, complex systems, and with this new arsenal and mindset, you now hold the keys to understanding them. The only remaining question is what you will choose to learn next. Let us return for a moment to that student at 2 in the morning, lost in a sea of highlighted text and mounting despair. The climax of our story is not a distant, abstract concept. It is the radical reinterpretation of this very moment. The revelation is this: every minute spent passively rereading that page was cementing a lie. Every highlighted sentence was a monument to a deeply flawed methodology. The comforting feeling of familiarity you mistook for learning was a cognitive mirage, leading you deeper into a desert of wasted effort. The system you trusted, the one you were taught was the only way, was not just broken. It was designed to fail you in the moments that mattered most, creating anxiety and self-doubt where confidence should have been growing. This realization can be a difficult one. It forces us to look back at years of academic struggle, the all-nighters, the pre-exam panic, the sinking feeling of a grade that didn't reflect the hours poured in, and see it not as a necessary evil, but as a largely avoidable tragedy. It is the jarring discovery that the entire game was rigged, and you were unknowingly playing by the wrong rules. The emotional weight of that truth can be immense. It's the frustration of knowing that your hard work, your genuine effort, and your sincere desire to learn were channeled into strategies that offered only the illusion of progress. This is the moment of tension, the anger at a broken system, and the grief for lost time. But out of this tension comes the critical turn, the singular idea that changes the entire landscape of learning. What if the most important metric of your study session is not the duration, but the intensity of the struggle? What if the moments of greatest discomfort, when you have to close the book and force your mind to reconstruct a concept from scratch, are the only moments that truly count? This question is the pivot upon which your entire understanding of effort must now rotate. We have been conditioned to believe that effort is measured in hours logged at a desk. The truth is that genuine productive effort is measured in deliberate, focused acts of retrieval. The goal isn't to spend more time, but to make the time you spend matter more. Here, active recall emerges not just as a technique, but as a declaration of intent. It is the conscious decision to abandon the safe harbor of passive recognition and venture into the storm of active retrieval. It is the courage to face the blank page and ask, what do I truly know? This act transforms you from a spectator into a participant in your own learning. You are no longer just consuming information. You are actively wrestling with it, forcing it to bend to your understanding, to be reformed in your own words. This is where the passive student dies and the active learner is born. It is a fundamental shift from, I hope I remember this, to I will practice remembering this. And this brave act is sustained by the quiet genius of spaced repetition. If active recall is the intense workout, spaced repetition is the intelligent recovery plan that allows the muscle to grow back stronger. It acknowledges a fundamental biological truth. Our brains are designed to forget. Cramming is a futile attempt to defy this law of nature. Spacing is the act of working in harmony with it. By revisiting information at the precise moment it is about to fade, you are exploiting a natural mechanism for its intended purpose, to identify and hardwire the knowledge that is truly essential. You stop fighting your memory and start collaborating with it, becoming a strategic architect of your own mind. This convergence is the core of the epiphany. The entire purpose of studying has been misunderstood. We thought the challenge was to get information into our heads. The real challenge, the one that actually creates strong memories, is practicing getting information out. That is the work. That is the entire job. This simple, powerful inversion changes everything. Suddenly, the frustration of not being able to recall a fact is not a failure. It is the workout in progress. The ease of rereading is not a sign of learning. It is a sign of wasted time. You have been measuring success with the wrong ruler, celebrating the very activities that guaranteed you would forget. The power dynamic has now been irrevocably altered. You are no longer a passive victim of a forgetful brain, hoping that some information will magically stick. You are now the active, deliberate trainer of your memory. You understand that the sensation of difficulty is your compass, pointing you directly toward activities that build real, lasting knowledge. The fear of forgetting is replaced by a strategy for remembering. The tools you were using were faulty, but your mind was never the problem. With this revelation, the anxiety of the 2 a.m. study session dissipates, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who finally understands not just what to learn, but exactly how to learn it. We have dismantled the old, crumbling edifice of passive learning and laid the foundation for a new way of thinking. The tools of active recall, spaced repetition, and the Feynman technique are more than just strategies. They represent a new relationship with your own mind. They are the principles of a dialogue where you no longer shout at your brain, hoping it will listen, but instead work with its natural rhythms, strengths, and even its predictable weaknesses. This journey was never about revealing a magical shortcut to effortless knowledge. It was about exposing the profound inefficiency of the path we were all told to walk and illuminating a more intelligent, albeit more challenging route. The work is still required, but now your effort will finally be rewarded with genuine, lasting mastery. The central promise has always been this: it is not about the brain you have, but about how you use it. For too long, we have conflated the possession of knowledge with the process of learning, leading to a culture where people believe they are either smart or not. This is the final illusion to be shattered. Learning is not a trait, it is a skill. And like any skill, it can be practiced, developed, and mastered. We haven't offered you a new brain, but something far more valuable: the user's manual for the incredibly powerful one you have always possessed. The potential was never locked away. You were simply handed the wrong set of keys. This realization extends far beyond the walls of any classroom or lecture hall. The fear of complex subjects is a cage that limits not only our academic and professional prospects, but also our personal growth and curiosity. Mastering the skill of learning is the ultimate act of liberation. It empowers you to approach any domain, be it art, science, technology, or philosophy, not with apprehension, but with a confident and strategic curiosity. It is the meta-skill that unlocks all other skills, transforming the world from a place of intimidating, monolithic subjects into a landscape of fascinating systems, all waiting to be understood by anyone willing to engage with them correctly. So the next time you sit down to study, you are faced with a fundamental choice that will define your future. You will no longer ask, "How many hours do I need to sit here?" That is the question of the old paradigm, the question of the passive victim. Instead, you will ask a far more intelligent and powerful question: what is the most effective way to teach this to my brain? This simple shift in perspective changes everything. It reframes the task from one of endurance to one of strategy, from brute force to elegant efficiency. It is the difference between being a prisoner of your own study schedule and being the architect of your own intellect. The final question, then, is not whether you are capable of learning what you need to learn. The evidence is clear: you are. The science is definitive. These methods work. The true question that should echo in your mind long after this video ends is a far more thrilling and terrifying one. Now that you know that the barriers were never real, that the limits were self-imposed by a broken methodology, what will you dare to become? Your potential was never the issue. The only thing that has changed is that now you finally know how to unleash it.